Hello and welcome to Ukramedia.com. My name is Sergey Praknevsky, and today I'm going to show you 19 more useful expressions in After Effects. That's right, 19 more, which means this is the part 2. And in the first part, I went over 16 useful expressions in After Effects. So definitely check that one out first before you watch this one. Before we get to the tutorial, I want to show you something I'm very passionate about, and that is this modular lower third kit that is available at Ukramedia.com/shop. You can purchase it today, and the cool thing about this, that it's fully modular, automated, responsive, whatever you want to call it. I mean, you can change the name of the text, let's say Carrie Patrick, and things adjust automatically. You know, the width of it, the animation stays the same, the timing doesn't change. Another cool thing is if, let's say, you can scale the text and things adjust, or you can, if this text becomes smaller than or shorter than the other two, the edge knows that and automatically stays with the longest text. And the same thing is true with any other ones as well. So if this one goes up and it becomes bigger than the other, it pushes the edge with it. So that's really cool. And another, I'm scratching the surface here, but by the way, I created a video at Ukramedia.com/shop to where you can, it goes over every feature on here, but I'm just highlighting a few that I'm excited about. For example, you can turn off this logo at any time. You place the logo in this comp. There are only 2 comps. This is it. And, at any moment you can take it off and things, the animation doesn't change. You can turn it back on. You can also, turn off the text, the first title and the second, or vice versa. And you can see that things adjust, animation stays the same. You can even turn off the logo and just end up with the name. I mean, there are more things you can do in here. You can change the color, you can change, the sizing, the gaps and all that stuff. And it is in here, you can even do the rounded corners, skew. And again, whatever you change in here, unless you're messing with the animation settings, whatever you change in here doesn't change the animation one bit. So it's super cool. But another thing I'm excited about is that this file itself is very tiny. Like if you download it, you'll see it's not even 1 meg. And after you unzip the zip file, it's still very tiny. So it's like, what, 3 megs or so? So yeah, this thing is super tiny. You can literally email that to yourself. And another thing, I've created some presets for it. You can go through like the just basic designs that I have that you can build up on. You can also go through, some simple ones and stuff like that. I mean, you can see what I have here. And the cool thing about it is you can build up on it. You can open up different settings and play with it. It's super awesome. And I also created these color themes that you can just shuffle through on the fly and pick your own color combination that you like and go from there. So yeah, it's definitely useful. Another cool thing about this that I'm very excited about. By the way, all this stuff that I'm talking about, you can check it out in the video. All the descriptions that I'm talking about, you can check it out at Ukramedia.com/shop. But the thing about all this is that now, you can control everything that I'm controlling in here. You can also adjust in Premiere. So once you set up your fonts and stuff, you can export it into Premiere. And inside Premiere, you can adjust the text and everything, and things shift. And so you don't even have to leave Premiere. So it's super awesome. So again, these features are, in the video that you can check out. But in the meantime, let's dive right into our 19 useful expressions in After Effects. Number 1 is Modulus, and this one is a small one, but I find it very useful, especially for things like clocks, countdowns, and stuff like that. So let me show you what it can do. I have the simple composition here, nothing complicated, just a JPEG background here. But I'm going to double-click on this text to bring text into my composition. I'm just going to type, as usual, Ukramedia.com, but you don't have to type anything, because we're going to go down to text and source text right here. I'm going to select it and hit S twice on my keyboard to solo it. And next, I'm going to hold Alt on my keyboard and left click on the stopwatch to activate the expression. And so now I can type my expression in this window here. First, I'm going to do just time, just to see what that does. So we can see time, but let's speed this number up a bit. So I'm going to do times 20. And so now we can see that it's jumping pretty good. And the only other problem we have all this other jazz that I want to get rid of. It's too many numbers. So how do I round this up to like 27 at this point? And if you've seen my previous tutorial, the useful expressions in After Effects part 1, you would know how to use this function called math.round and open parentheses and close parentheses. And basically, it'll round whatever's between these 2 parentheses. And so if you let go, you can see it's going to round it up to 27. And so that's exactly what I need. So that's good. But now, let me show you what Modulus is, how you can definitely use it. So for example, right now it's climbing up to 60 and it keeps going. But what if, let's say I wanted to, once it hits 60, instead of going to 61, I want it to go back to 0. So how do I make that happen? So this is where Modulus comes in handy. So I'm going to add to this expression. I'm going to do a %key on my keyboard and then type 60. And so what it's going to do now, once it hits 60, after that, it's going to go back to the beginning. And so that's what Modulus does. So let's see this played out. So you can see we're in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and then back to 0. Number 2 is active and enabled. And so for this example, I have a quick setup in here. And let me briefly tell you what I have. So just to have a simple null that plays the role of a parent of text 1 and 2. And so basically I linked them up, parented both of them to this control, and now I can easily grab the null and both of the texts are moving with it. And for the last name, I used a little expression. And so basically for the X, I separated my dimension, and then for the X position, I typed like a simple expression. So I just gave it a random name. It can be anything. And then I defined it. I gave it some kind of value. So I said, this thing, you'll be this layer. So every time I say first name, I'm actually referring to Sailor. So now I'm typing first name, which is that layer, and then I'm adding, or I'm calling the width of it. So if you don't know how to use the source rect@time, be sure to check out part 1. But basically, I'm grabbing the width of that layer and I'm adding it to this last name. So this last name started out at the 00 here, and then I added the width of the first name. So then it pushed it to here, and then I said plus 40, and then pushed it. It created this gap here. But now what I want to do, when I uncheck the visibility over here, I want for the last name to shift back to the 00. And then when I enable it, I want it to go back to where it was. So how do I do that? And to do that, I'll use an if statement. And by the way, if you don't know how to do if statement, I did go over that in my first part of this tutorial, so definitely check it out. But let me show you what you do. I'm going to type an if statement, if, and then I'm going to say if what? First name, which is that layer, whatever I define in here, is enabled. And you can do, either active or enabled, type any of them. I'm going to do active. If active is checked, and that's what it means, 2 equal signs mean is checked, and then do this. But first you have to open up the bracket. So if that's checked, run this. And then if it's not checked, let's do close bracket and open bracket. In between here, I'm going to type else. So if it's not checked, do this, which is 0. And then let's close the bracket. So what I'm asking here, I'm going to say, hey, if this thing is checked, which it is now, do this, what it's doing now. But if it's not checked, 0 out the X position of this Patrick layer. So let's see if it works. I'm going to uncheck this. And as you can see, it shifts Patrick back to the origin. If I check it, it does the opposite. Number 3 is parent. And so I have just a text, and then I have text 1 and 2. So if I parent this Ukramedia text to text 1, it snaps right to the right of this text. But if I parent it to the text 2, it snaps right to the end of text 2. And in fact, I can, add anything I want to it. It will honor that. So how do I set this up using expressions? So let me show you. First thing I'm going to do, hold Alt on my keyboard and then click on the stopwatch here to get rid of my expressions. So right now you can see that this text doesn't have anything, no expressions, none of that. So let's start fresh. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to pick whip, or in other words, parent this Ukramedia text to text 1, because we'll be working with that first. And I'm going to alt click on the Y position here and type 0. Basically, it's like a constraint. So I don't want any other number than, the 0. So that's what it's going to do. And for the X position, I'm going to hold alt click on the stopwatch there. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to type, in fact, I'm going to pick whip to the parented layer, text 1. Okay, and then I'm going to add to it. So I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to grab the source rect@time. In other words, I'm grabbing width of the text 1. And so if I let go right now, you'll see that it'll snap. It'll add this width of this text 1 to the position of Ukramedia. So you can see it's shifted nicely. So if I type, anything in here, it's working. So, but let's add some gap in here. So I'm going to say plus, and then let's do like 30. So that's working fine. But now if I select this Ukramedia text and if I parent it to text 2, it'll snap it to text2 on the y-axis because I have it zeroed down. And then, but the thing is, it's still grabbing the width of text1. So it's not really working for the text2. So how do we fix that? So this is where parent comes in handy. So instead of me referring to specific layer, instead of doing that, I'm just going to type in parent. So I'm just saying grab the width of the parented layer. So now it doesn't really matter. You can parent it to any layer, and it will automatically adjust and snap it to where it needs to be. Number 4 is try catch statement. And this one's not a very flashy one, but I find myself using it all the time. So let me show you what it does. And for this, I'm going to continue with the previous example. And so what happens if this Ukramedia text doesn't have a parent? In other words, if it's not parented to anything, what happens? So if you set that to none, you can see we get this error. So how do we fix it? And so here's how we do it. Obviously something is messed up with this expression because we don't have a parent, so it freaked out and gave us this error. So to fix it, we're going to use this try catch statement, but it's very similar to if else statement. And I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to type, let's say try, and then open bracket. We're going to say try this statement, and if something happens to it, if it gives you an error, so this we're going to put in here. We're going to say catch, and then in parentheses we're going to say error. So if something happens to it, catch it and play, or do this, and we'll tell it to do something else. And in this case, I'm just going to say value, just whatever value is in here. Just in other words, if this goes nuts, go to this. And so close bracket. And so now, as you can see, the error disappeared and it works just fine. Number 5 is hasParent. And so for this, we'll be recreating this example. And so here's what I have. I have just a Ukramedia logo, and it's not parented to anything. But if I parent it, let's say, to the left null, it goes to the left null. If I parent it to the right, it goes to the right. And if I set it to none, it'll just go back to my original position, to whatever value I have in here. So let me show you how to recreate that using expressions. So I'm going to hold Alt-click on the stopwatch to get rid of my expression to start fresh, and hold Alt-click again on the stopwatch to start a new expression. And in here, I'm going to do if statement. So I'm going to say if, and in the parentheses, I'm going to say if, let's do this, this layer, period, has parent. So basically I'm saying if this layer has parent, open bracket, here's what I want to do if it has a parent. I want for the position to be 0 on the x-axis and 0 on the y-axis. And so that's what I want to happen when it has parent. But if it doesn't, I'm going to say else. So if it doesn't, I'm going to set the position to the current value, whatever value is, whatever value you have set in here. So let's see if this works. So right now, if I parent, right now it's not parented, so it's just, it has whatever value that is in here. But if I parent to the right, it goes to the right. And if I parent it to the left, it goes to the left. Number 6 is else if. And that one is basically like an add-on to if statement. And let me show you like a practical example. And by the way, we'll be recreating this. So right now I have just a text and then a few checkboxes. So if I select one of these checkboxes, let's say A, you can see that it changes to 10. And if I select B, it changes to 20, and C changes to 30. So let me show you how to set this up using else if. So I'm going to go to the source text and hold Alt-click to get rid of my old expression, and Alt-click on the stopwatch again to create a new expression. And right now I'm just going to define each checkbox. So I'm going to say A, it can be anything, but I'm just going to say A, you're going to be A checkbox, and then B, you're going to be B checkbox, and then C, you'll be C. And so next what I'll do, I'm going to use an if statement. So I'm going to say if, and then in parentheses I'm going to say if A, which we know the A refers to the checkbox, if A is checked, so if checkbox A is checked, I want for it to do this. I want for it to be 10. Else I want to say, and if it's not checked, I want to say select check box, okay? And then close bracket. So, but as soon as I let go, you'll see that I'm going to get an error. As you can see, we have an error. But here's a problem, because in After Effects, if you want for the text to be just a text, you need to put it in the quotations. So basically, you need to make that a string. And so when you do that, it just reads it as a text. But if you don't, it just thinks it's part of the expression or something like that. So when I do that, you can see it's working fine because nothing is checked. So it's referring to this select checkbox. But if I select my A checkbox, you can see that it changes it to 10. All right, but so how do I add these other two? So right now, if statement only allows me for one, but how do I add more? So this is where else if comes in very handy. So now I'm going to say else if, and in the parentheses, I'm going to say if B is checked, I want for it to be 20. So now if I go and select B, it's going to go to 20. And with else if, you can do as many of them as you want. So I'm going to select this and do Control C and copy that, and then do Control V, and instead of B, I'm going to change that to C. So now, if C is checked, I'm going to basically change it to 30. So I want for it to say 30. So now if I change it to C, it shows 30. And it's pretty cool because you can do anything in there. You can say, again, make sure it's in the quotations. I'm going to say ucromedia.com. So if C checkbox is checked, it changes to ucromedia.com. Number 7 is function. And this one is a small one, but it's very useful. In fact, I want to take a couple minutes just to explain it to you so you get it, because I think you'll find it useful as well. So let me start out by going into the source text of my text layer here, and I'll click on the stopwatch here. And now I'm going to type my expression in here. So I'm going to define my function here. So I'm just going to say, let's do this, function. And then next you can type any name. So I'm going to say ucromedia, but it can be anything. And then in parentheses, I'm just going to put n. It can be anything, but I'm going to say n for a number because you essentially going to replace it for a number. It will definitely make more sense as we go. So I'm going to do open bracket. And so inside here, so now we have our function and return. And so now we can type in our expression here. Basically, what is it that you want to run in this function? So I'm going to say this n, whatever number is in here that we put in here, I want to add, let's say, 100 to it. And then let's do close bracket. So again, nothing's really happening here. But if I type in, let's say, 5, we see our number 5. But I can run this 5 through this function. So I can say ucromedia, and then in parentheses, I'm going to put 5. And so what it's doing is going to take this 5. In our function, we have n, but it will replace this n for 5 and basically be 5 plus 100. So essentially, we'll see 105. So let's see if that happens. And as you can see, it did happen. So why is this useful? This could be useful if you're writing expressions and stuff, if you have something long and you don't want to keep writing it over and over. So, I mean, we can add on to this. We can say plus, let's do like a string. So let's do plus, let's do space, ucromedia.com. And as you can see, you'll do that. I mean, the sky is the limit what you can do with this. But also, you can do if statements with this thing. So instead of return, we can do, let me do this first. I'm going to say time times 20. And as you can see, it's working. And let's round this up using the math round. So essentially, that's a function too. And so now we just have a number going like this. But what if, let's say, when it's a single digit, I want to add a 0 to it so that at all times it's always 2-digit number. So here's where we would use that if statement. So in here, I'm going to say if, and in parentheses, I'm going to say if this number that we put in here is smaller than 10, if it's smaller than 10, return, meaning I want for it to add a string, add a 0 to it. So 0 plus n, else return. And if it's not, I want for it to just add nothing to it. You kind of have to do it this way. So that will work. So if I type in my ucromedia function and put that stuff inside the parentheses, you will see that if I go below, it adds a 0 to it. Another thing I want to point out here is that you can name your function 2 ways. So this was one way, but there's another way you can do it is by simply typing ucromedia and then equals, and then you can say function, and that will work as well. Number 8 is sampleImage. And so let me show you how powerful this thing is. So for this example, we'll be creating this. So I'm going to select this null. And if you notice, whatever this null is hovering over, whatever color, it changes my circle to that color. So let me show you how to set this up using expressions. So I have this circle and I already have this color in there. So I'm going to get rid of the old expression and Alt click on the stopwatch again to create a new one. And so now I'm going to define some things. I'm just going to say target position, and it's going to be pick whip to this thing. So that's going to be the position. And then I'm going to do colors. So it's going to be this layer right here. And I think this is it for right now. So let's type our expression. So I want to say colors. So we're talking about this layer right here, period. And then I want to go to this expression helper here and go to layer and then general. And this very last thing, sampleImage, and just click on that. And you can see that it adds that to our expression. And so now we can keep going. So instead of this point in here, we need to define this point because right now it doesn't know which point it is. So I'm going to copy this and define this point in here. So I'm going to say point UR, and then I can say target position. And so now if I let go of this, it should work. So if I select this target and just move it around, you can see that it changes our circle to whatever color that we're hovering over. Number 9 is time conversion. And let me go over some of them because I think you'll find it useful. So I'm going to go to this text in here and Alt click on my source text. And in here, I'm just going to type time. And this is what happens when we do time. You know, it's just time. But what if I wanted to convert time to frames? So this is where time to frames comes in handy. Inside here, I'm just going to say time and then define my frame rate. So it's 29.97 at the moment. You might have it differently. And so now, if I switch control click on here, you can see that it shows me frames. So that's time to frames. And then let's see if let's do this. So I'm going to say frames. I'm going to define that's frames because we're going to use it for the next example. And so now let's say, what if I want to do frames to time? So I'm going to say frames to time. And inside there, I'm just going to say, instead of time, I'm going to say frames because we know this thing has frames and not time. So, and then I will do the following. So again, 29.97, define our frame rate. So now you can see that it takes it back to time. All right, the next on the list is time to time code. So if I just get rid of this and do time to time code, and then in here, we'll do the same thing. We'll just do time and then the frame rate, 29.97. And as you can see, we see the time code, which can be very useful. So that's the third one. And the fourth one, we'll do time to current format. So let me show you. I'm just going to type time to current format. And the same thing in here, we're just going to say time and then define our frame rate. And so now if you let go, you can see we're in frames right now. So we're seeing frames. But if we control click on here and switch it to seconds, you can see that we have a different time code. Number 10 is velocityAtTime and speedAtTime. And those are somewhat similar, but yet different. And so the difference between velocity and speed, velocity has speed and direction. So it has, it can be negative number, it can be positive. It also can be 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, stuff like that. So, but speed, it only has one number and it's always positive. So let me show you like an example here. So I'm going to select this text here and just Alt click on the source text, and we're just going to type stuff in here so you can see visually what's going on. So I have, by the way, before we do that, I have this layer in here, this text layer, and it's animated. So we have like a practical example. So just a 2 keyframe animation, nothing crazy. So I'm going to pick whip to this position. You can see here's a position, you can see numbers. But if I can add to this position, I'm going to say, let's do speedAtTime. And then inside parentheses, I'm going to say time. And so now it's going to give us the speed of this text. So this is the speed. And as you can see, it's just one number and it's positive. We have some, we can round it up using the math round expression or function. But usually it's just one number. So, but if we change the speed to, let's do velocity, watch what happens. So now you can see that it's negative. And it has another dimension to it. So it's two-dimensional. And yeah, that can be a bit problematic, or it can be, it depends on what you're going for. But let's say, what if you wanted to just this x-axis? You would just do index 0 at the end of it, and it will just give you the one number. Or what if, let's say, you wanted for it to be positive? So then you can say, you can do math.abs, and in parentheses, you put that value in there, and it'll make that number positive. And you can even go further. Let's say, what if you just want that number? You can do math.round, and like this. Gets crazy. But that's the idea. And by the way, all this stuff I did go over in the first part of this tutorial, so check it out. It's a different video. You'll have to find it on ucremedia.com or on this YouTube channel. But yeah, so this is what velocity and speed does. But let's see a practical example of this. So I'm going to erase this and then go to this position or this text. And I'm going to bring in this slant effect. So I'm going to, and what it does, it basically slants it a little bit. So I'm going to use speed for this, but you can get an idea how you can use both. So I'm going to alt-click on this slant, and I'm going to type, I'm going to link it to the position. Let's select the slant and hit S twice to solo it, and then hit P, Shift P to add position. And I'm going to just go into this expression in here, extend it some, and then I'm going to pick whip to the position. And then I'm going to say, all right, instead of this position 0, I'm going to do period. And so I'm going to type speed at time, and then I'm going to say time. And it's going to be crazy right now. You'll see. It's going to be nuts. Yeah, because we need to divide it by like maybe 10 or so. Come it down a little bit. So you see how it slants it as it comes. The speed, it applies that speed velocity on top of this value. You can actually see the value, what it's doing. So that can be useful for some things. And let's copy this and maybe bring in like a directional blur. And put it on top of this text. And then maybe put it like 90 degrees, make sure it's the same direction. And basically, I'm going to do the same thing for this directional blur to kind of add an interesting feel to it. I'm going to go into here and select this blur length, hit S twice to solo it, alt-click to activate the expression, and I'm going to paste that same expression into here. And you can see, there you go. You can see how it gives you an interesting feel. So yeah, this is basically velocity and speed in a nutshell. Number 11 is comment. And this one is very useful if you're working with a lot of people, or if you're handing your project over to somebody else and you have a lot of expressions. And you can, with this comment thing, you can leave notes in your expressions, label things, and it can definitely clear out a lot of headaches. So let me show you how to use it. So I'm going to select this logo and hit R to reveal the rotation property. I'm going to hold Alt on my keyboard and click on the stopwatch to add an expression. And so I'm just going to type time times, let's do like 30. And we just have a simple rotation here. But what if I want to add like a note to this saying like, hey, don't change this value or something like that. So to do that, you'll just do 2 forward slashes, and then you can say anything like don't erase this. And then if you let go, it's still there. You can even label things, maybe like this could be like, you can say like time expression or something like that. So you can see how useful this can be. But the problem with this comment, what if, let's say, I want to leave 2 lines or 3 or 4, in other words, multiple lines. So let's say I'm going to just type random stuff. Look what happens. So I get an error, and if I condense it down to 1 line, it works fine. So how do I do multiple lines? And to do that, it's easy. Just do forward slash and asterisk, and then you can type anything you want. And when you're done, you just do asterisk and forward slash again, and there you have it. Number 12 is inPoint and outPoint. And so let me show you how awesome this thing is. So for this example, I just have text and my Ucremedia logo. So I'm going to select this text first and go into the source text. Alt-click on the stopwatch to see. Basically, I'm going to show you visually what I'm doing here. And so first I'm going to type in inPoint. And automatically you'll see that it will give me the endpoint of my layer. And so a layer has in and out point. So it basically tells me where this inPoint is on the timeline. So if I put it, let's say at 2 seconds, if I select this and do Alt open square bracket, you can see that it will snap this inPoint to 2 seconds. So now I can see that it's at 2 seconds, or if I put it back at 1 and stuff like that. So you can see how it basically gives you the value of your inPoint on your timeline. And so the same thing applies for outPoint. So if you type outPoint, it'll give you, right now it's at 6 seconds, so you can see it's there, but you can move it around and stuff like that. But this information is pretty valuable. And by the way, if you want to refer to another layer, you can just, pretty much drag this pick whip to, let's say, this logo in here, and then you can just say period and then do inPoint. And it will do the same thing, it'll tell you the inPoint of that layer. So let me show you a practical use for this. So I'm going to collapse this down, and I'm going to select my logo here. I'm going to hide that, and then hit T to reveal the opacity. And so I'm going to Alt-click on the stopwatch here, and let's do like a basic linear expression. So I'm going to say linear, and then inside parentheses, I'm going to say time. I want a starting point to be inPoint, and ending point I want to be inPoint plus, let's do half a second, 0.5. And so when it's inPoint, I want it to be 0. And when it's here, I want it to be 100. So now you can see that at the beginning, it's nothing, I can't see my logo. So when I play, it reveals itself. So what's cool about this, it doesn't matter where my endpoint is, it'll always start there. So that's pretty awesome. So the same thing applies for outPoint. So if you just type instead of in, you do out, it'll fade out and stuff like that. But let me show you how to do it this way. So in fact, let me do this. So I'm going to define this as A. So first will be A, and then I'm going to copy this thing here and then paste it here, and then just change A to B, and then in to out on both. Okay, and then instead of +5, I'm going to hide this. Or in fact, I'll cut it. So, and I'll add it to this one here. And instead of plus, I'll do minus. So I'm going to subtract. So for the end. So now I just want to do this. I'm going to say A minus B. And so if I play this at the beginning, you can see that it fades in, and at the end it will fade out. And it doesn't matter where you place it, it will always do that based on this equation. Number 13 is smooth, and it does exactly what it sounds. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. I have this logo in here, and I applied a wiggle expression to the X position, and then I baked it into keyframes. So now you see this wiggly animation, and if you look at the graph editor, you can see my curve. It's all over the place. It's pretty rigid. So how do I smooth this out using this smooth expression? So I'm going to get out of the graph editor and Alt-click on this stopwatch for my position, X position. And inside there, I'm going to go here, property, and then select smooth. And so let me go back to the graph editor. And what it does, and by the way, I'm going to check this post expression graph, and it basically shows me what the expression is doing. So this middle line is the expression, and the outer is basically what the keyframes are doing. So the width, basically what it does, it kind of shows you how many seconds to evaluate your keyframes to the left and right. So, the smaller the number, let's say if I take it to 0.1, it'll be more like the original curve that you had, or, movement. And if you take it to, let's say, 0.5, it's going to look completely different. So I'm going to undo that. So I'm going to keep it maybe at 0.2. And the second one, the samples, you basically telling the curve or whatever, how many keyframes to evaluate. So if 5, the more keyframes you have, the more smooth the curve will be. So if I take it, let's say, up to 15, you can see that it's pretty smooth. And you can actually, maybe instead of 2, maybe I'll do 0.15. And you can see it's more similar to the original one, but it's a lot smoother. And now if you play it, it's pretty smooth. Number 14 is lookAt, and it's a very simple one. Let me show you how to use it. So for this example, I want this arrow to point at the logo the whole time. And it is important that both of your layers are in 3D. So I'm going to select this arrow, hit R on my keyboard to see the rotation properties, and I'm going to alt click on the stopwatch of this orientation property, and inside there I'm just going to define my target. So I'm going to say target, and my target is going to be this vector logo, and then I'm going to say look at, and inside my parentheses I'm going to say target transform position. So basically the position of my target, and then I'm just going to say the position of the current layer, and I can just say transform period position. And so now it kind of works. So I have this, so I can move it around, but it's just on the wrong axis. So you just have to make sure to go to Y rotation and set it at -90. And so now it points right at your logo, so you can move it around, and you can see it's working quite well. Number 15 is posterizeTime, and this one is very easy and quick. For this, I'm going to use this Ukramedia logo again. I'm going to select it, hit R on my keyboard to reveal the rotation property, and Alt left click on the stopwatch to activate my expression. And in here, I'm going to type, let's do time times like 160 or something like that. So you can see it's rotating, which is exactly what I want. And the next, what I'll do, I'll apply this posterizeTime expression right before this time expression. So I'm just going to type posterizeTime, and then in parentheses, I'm going to type the frame rate that I want. So for example, I'm going to do something low, maybe like 6. And as you can see, it gives you that stop motion effect. Number 16 is fromComp and fromWorld, and let me show you what it does. So for this example, I have a target in here. I just created with using shape layers, and if I play it, applied some wiggle expression to the position, so it's wiggling, it's working nicely, doing exactly what I wanted to do. But I'm going to bring in a new solid into my composition. I'm going to do Control Y on my keyboard to bring a new solid, and I'll make sure that it's the comp size. Hit OK. And so now I'm going to drop it right underneath my target here. And I'm going to drop this right on effect right on top of my solid. And I'm going to label this right on. And in here, I'm going to change the color to like an orange color, maybe a bit darker. And then I'm going to change maybe the size to like 16 or so, something big. Maybe not that big. Let's do like 14. Okay. You can see there's a small dot, and I'm going to push this brush spacing to, I don't know, something like that. And so now if I play, nothing happens, but I'm going to link in, if I hit E, select this solid, hit E to see my effect, and I'm going to select the brush position of my right on, hit S twice on my keyboard to solo that, and then I'm going to alt click on the stopwatch and parent this to the position of this target. And watch what happens. It works nicely. Just like you would expect. But what happens, the reason why it works so nicely, because we have, the composition size and this solid size are identical, and so it works fine. So, but if you would have something like a solid that's smaller than this, if you scale this down, you can see that it's not working well. Or if you, shift it over here, you can see that it's not working well. So it only works well if it's in the perfect place and stuff. So what happens if it shifts? How do you link it up again? And so this is where fromComp, fromWorld comes in handy. So I'm going to use the first one, fromComp. So I'm going to do fromComp, and then open parentheses and close parentheses. And so now I basically put this expression that we had earlier inside this fromComp, and let's see what happens. And as you can see, that it works quite nicely. So now it doesn't matter where I move this. It'll still match up, and it'll be great. But what happens when you make this a right-on solid, a 3D? And as you can see, it's just not working. So this is where fromWorld comes in handy. So fromWorld deals with 3D, so I'm just going to change this to fromWorld. And so now, if you preview this, you can see that it's working quite well. 17 is fromCompToSurface. And so for this example, I'm going to pick up where we left off. And I know we've done a bunch of stuff to this right on solid. So I'm going to do one more thing to it and see if we can fix it. So we converted this to 3D, and we were able to fix it using fromWorld. So now what if I take this solid and hit R to reveal my rotation? What if I just rotate it just on different axes? So like maybe something like this. It looks awkward. And if I preview this, you can see that now it's not lining up, even if I have, fromWorld. So how do I fix that? And it's really easy. All you have to do is just use this fromCompToSurface. So I'm just going to type, instead of fromWorld, I'm going to do fromCompToSurface. And let's see if it works. And it's working great. Number 18 is key, and with this one, I'm only going to scratch the surface, but let me show you some of the things you can do, and I'll also finish it with just a practical example. But for this, I have text and a circle for my background here, and the text actually has 2 keyframes, so it animates from the side like so. And I'm going to actually go into the source text of my text, and I'm going to alt-click on the stopwatch here so you can visually see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to, let's say I'm going to refer to the second keyframe. And to do that, I'm going to pick whip to the position, so because it is in the position property. And then I have this index I'm going to get rid of, and I'm going to hit period to keep going. So now I'm going to type key, and in parentheses, I'm going to define which key I want. So it's based on index. So here's index 1, 2. So I want the second one. So I'm going to type 2. And I need to keep going because what do I want from this key? And if you go to this expression helper in the key, you see like some of the options in here. So you can either grab the value, time, or index. Let's play with the value first. So right now it's going to show me the value of the second keyframe. So if I let go, you can see 965.40, and that's exactly what I'm seeing in here. But if you change that to, let's say, time, it's going to show you the time of this keyframe. In other words, where it's located in the timeline. So if you move it around, you can see it's changing, and it's based on the seconds. So that's time. And the third one is index, but it's not very useful for this example because obviously we are referring to the second index, so it's going to give us 2. All right, so that more has to do with nearest key, which I'll show you here in a second. So in fact, I'll do it right now. So I'm going to type nearest key. And instead of 2, I'm going to just type time. So right now, whatever key I'm closest, that's what it's going to give me the index of that key. So if I'm closer to this one, it's going to give me 1. If I'm closer to that one, it's going to give me 2. So that's what that index does. But let me show you a practical example of this, of what we just went over. So I'm going to delete everything in here. And so here's the animation. And I'm going to go into the position of this circle. I'm going to right click on the position and do separate dimensions, and I'm only going to focus on this X position. So hit S twice to solo that, and alt click to activate the expression. And so in here, I'm going to pretty much define a few things. I'm going to say, let's do key time. And so key time is going to be basically this position. I'm going to grab key, index 2. And what I want from that, obviously it would be time, so I'm going to say period time, and that's pretty much it. And the second one I'm going to do key, let's do value. And so in here I'm going to grab the same thing. I'm going to grab this position and key, and I'm going to refer to the second one again, and instead of time I'm going to do value. So value, and because it's a 2-dimensional value, I need to refer which value I want. So I want the X position, so it's going to be 0, index 0. So I'm going to do index 0, and now I'm going to do a linear expression. So I'm going to do linear. In fact, let's do ease, and then in parentheses I'm going to say time, and then I'm obviously going to start from 0, and then in here I'll type key time, basically because it's the time of the last keyframe. So it's going to end where the last keyframe ends. So that's that. And then I want it to go from 0. Actually, let's do from like 400, negative 400 to, let's do key value to the value of this keyframe. So if I let go and just preview this, you can see that what it's doing here, which is awesome because if I just move this keyframe, let's say over here, the animation will line up. Or if I, let's say, move the text itself, if I select the text and just move it over here, you can see that animation will line up based on that keyframe, value, and time. And the last one is marker key. And it's very similar to the key one, but instead of dealing with keyframes, it deals with markers. And in fact, again, I'm only going to scratch the surface with this one, but for this example, I have just a text circle again, and I have a bunch of markers on my text layer and the circle layer, and also in the composition here. So let me show you some of the things you can do with it. So I'm going to go into this text, source text, alt-click on a stopwatch to activate the expression, and that way you can see visually what I'm doing. And I'm going to refer to this second marker on my current layer. So what I'm going to do is just say marker, and then I'm going to say key, and now I have to refer which marker I want. So again, index 2, so we want that second one. And in here, you can still do time, and it'll give you the time of that marker. You can move it around. You can do index, just tell you it's the second one. You can do value, again, the same stuff as we did earlier, and it'll just tell you that. But you can also do more. You can go over here to marker key and select any of these. And so, for example, I'm going to select the duration of that of this marker, and it's going to say 0 because there's no duration going on right now. But if you hold Alt, click and drag, you can see that now it has changed. So, and again, all these options that you'll see in the key marker or marker key, you can, if you double click on the marker, you can have it in here. So if you select, let's say, chapter 22, and you refer to chapter, it'll give you 22. So you get the idea how this works. And let's say for, the same thing applies for nearest key. So I'm going to do nearest key. And instead of 2, I'm just going to say time. And let's say if I want the index of it. So right now, if I am close to the second one, I'm going to get, index 2, 1, 3. So you get the idea. But what if, let's say, I'm referring to the one in this on my current layer, but what if I wanted to refer to something in another layer, like this one? What if I want the third marker on this layer? So to do that, I'll just do, pick whip to the that layer, and then I'll keep going. So period, and I'll say marker, period key, and then there I'll refer to the third index. So we want this third marker, and then I can just grab whatever I want. Like let's do time. I want the time of that marker, so give me the time. I can move it around, and it's fine. But what if, let's say, I want to refer to the markers not on any layers, but in my composition? And to do that, I'm just going to do this. Instead of, I'm going to refer to the finished one, so 2. And I'm going to say this comp, and that's it. And it will refer to that one right there. If I move it around, you can see that the value is changing. And, you can, I think this is comment. So you can go over here and select the comment, and it'll tell you that finished comment. So you definitely get the idea of what I'm doing here. But let me show you a practical example of all this. So I'm going to alt-click on the stopwatch to get rid of my expression. And I'm going to right-click on this position and separate my dimensions. And now what I'm going to do for the X position, I'm going to select it and hit S twice to solve it. Alt-click on the stopwatch to activate my expression. And I'm just going to do the ease expression again. So I'm going to do time, and then I'll do from 0 to 1 second. And I wanted to go from negative 400 to current value. And so let's see what happens. So you can see it just animates in. But what if, let's say, I wanted my in and out point to be based on start and finish? So to do that, I'm going to say start, and I'll refer to that marker. So I'm going to say this comp, and then I'll say marker key, and that's key 1. And I want, so it has to do with time. So I want the time of that. And then I'll do finish, and the same thing, this comp, marker, and then key, and instead of 1, I'm going to do the second one for the finish, so 2, and I want the time of that as well. And so now, instead of 0, 1, I'm just going to say start and finish. And let's see if this works. So here's the first one. It starts right there and finish it there. So if I move this, let's say over here, you can see that it's going to go all the way to that one. And if I want to start in here, you'll see that it'll start. In fact, let's see a better visual here. It's starting there and ends in here. All right, thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you found it useful. If you would like to get the project file from this tutorial, you can download it at uchromedia.com. I'll include the link at the bottom of this video. And again, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, like the video, share it, add me on the social media. And also, we have a mentoring group on Facebook that are full of all kinds of creative people that are helping each other. I think today we have about 1,000 some people. So definitely they're all passionate, motivated, and they would love to get to know you. So definitely go there. The link is at the bottom of this video. And again, just a reminder, you can purchase modular lower third kit at uchromedia.com/shop. And until next time, my name is Sergey Praknevsky, and this is uchromedia.com.